Every rancher's daughter in Yavapai County was fixin' her hair that February. I know because I watched them. From my schoolhouse window, I could see the whole of Prescott's main road, the girls walking arm in arm past the mercantile, their mothers 2 steps behind, carrying bolts of satin and ribbon like they were marching into battle. And I suppose, in a way, they were. The Valentine's dance at Prescott Social Hall was the event of the season, had been for years, but this year was different. This year, Wyatt Cole was unattached. Wyatt Cole, richest cattleman for 100 miles, owned 3,000 head of cattle and more land than most men could ride across in a day. 34 years old, jaw like it was cut from the same red rock that lined the territory. And I mean, I'm just being honest here, the kind of quiet that made women lean in rather than pull away. Every mother in Prescott had a plan. Mrs. Calloway was certain her Emily would catch his eye blonde, straight-backed Emily, who walked like the ground was honored to hold her. Mrs. Dawson pushed her twin daughters forward at every church social like she was dealing cards. And Mrs. Harper, well, Mrs. Harper had been leaving fresh pies on Wyatt's porch since October. I watched all of it from behind glass. The way you watch weather coming in, knowing it ain't got nothing to do with you. My name is Anna Whitlow. I teach school 6 days a week at Prescott's only schoolhouse. 32 children from ages 6 to 14. And I walk with a limp that I've carried since I was 9 years old. Scarlet fever took 3 weeks of my childhood in the full use of my left leg. The doctor, I still remember his face. The way he looked at my mother instead of me, he said. She'll manage. That word became my whole life. I managed the schoolhouse. Managed the children kneeling beside Mary Dawson's desk to guide her hand through cursive letters. My bad leg folded awkward beneath me, because a child learns better when you meet her at her level. I managed to keep the hearth blazing from first bell to last, so those little ones never felt the February cold. I managed to walk the boardwalk with my uneven step, left foot landing solid, right foot dragging just a half beat behind, until the rhythm became so familiar, I barely heard it anymore. What I didn't manage was the fire in my own quarters. The small room behind the schoolhouse where I slept was cold most nights. I didn't see the point. A fire for one person felt like a waste of good wood. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I closed the shutters that evening and watched the last amber light slide off the Bradshaw Mountains. Somewhere out there, girls were pressing dresses and practicing curtsies and dreaming about a waltz with Wyatt Cole. I walked past the fabric table at Harlan's that afternoon without glancing at it. Stepped over the puddle on the boardwalk without adjusting my path for my limp. I'd stopped noticing, stopped adjusting, stopped. I blew out my lamp and let the cold settle. February 13th. I remember because little Thomas Briggs had asked me that morning how to spell Valentine, and I'd written it on the board in careful chalk letters while 32 pairs of eyes watched my hand move. The children left at 3. I stayed. I always stayed cleaning slates, stacking readers, sweeping chalk dust that never fully surrendered, no matter how hard I worked that broom. The quiet after dismissal was my favorite hour. The schoolhouse still warm, still humming with the ghost of children's voices. But mine, just mine. I didn't hear the horse, didn't hear the boots on the step. What I heard was the creak of the doorframe taking weight. And when I looked up well, there stood Wyatt Cole, filling that doorway like he'd been built to fit it, hat in his hands, and not held casual, neither held careful. The way a man holds something when his fingers need something to do because his heart's doing too much. I knew him. Everyone knew him. But I'd never spoken to him beyond, "Good mornin', Mr. Cole," at Sunday service. And even that I said to his shoulder because looking directly at a man like Wyatt Cole felt like staring at the sun. You knew it was there. You just didn't need to prove it. "Miss Whitlow," he said. His voice was lower than I expected, steadier. "Mr. Cole." I gripped the slate rag like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "Can I help you?" He turned that hat one full rotation in his hands. Then he swallowed just once, his throat moving like the words were something he had to push past. I noticed that, the way you notice a crack in something you assumed was solid. "I'd be honored," he said, "if you'd accompany me to the Valentine's dance. Saturday evening. I'll come at 6 with the wagon." The chalk dust froze in the air. I swear it did. Just hung there, suspended, like even the dust needed a moment to understand what had just happened. I searched his face. I'm not proud of that searching a man's face for mockery when he's standing there offering you something kind. But I'd learned that kindness aimed at women like me usually had a shape to it. Charity, pity, the sort of gesture a good man makes so he can feel better about himself come Sunday. I didn't find any of that in his eyes. What I found was, honestly, it looked like fear. His kind of fear. The quiet kind that lives in a man who can face down rustlers but can't quite look a schoolteacher in the eye. "Mr. Cole," I said, and my voice came out thinner than I wanted. "Folks'll talk." He put his hat back on, settled it slow. "I ain't askin' folks. Miss Whitlow, I'm askin' you." Then he nodded, just once said he'd be there Saturday at 6, and walked out. I heard his horse move off down the road. Hooves on packed dirt getting softer and softer until the quiet swallowed him whole. I sat down at my desk. The hearth was dying. I didn't relight it. I just sat there, staring at the door he'd walked through, and I felt something pressing against my ribs, something I hadn't felt in so long I'd forgotten its name. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the desk until they stopped. Shaken meant hoping, and I knew better than that. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in my cold room and built a case against myself the way a lawyer builds a case. Brick by careful brick. My limp, the stairs at the social hall, the way my left hip dropped with every step, turning my walk into a rhythm nobody wanted to dance to. The stairs, the whispers that would follow me like a second shadow, longer and darker than the first. I nearly convinced myself, I was so close to walking to his ranch come morning and saying, "Thank you, Mr. Cole, but I must decline." Had the words all lined up, practiced them twice in the dark, but morning came the way it always did, gray light through my window, cold floor under my feet, and instead of riding out to the Cole ranch, I walked to Harlan's general store. I don't know why. That's not true. I do know why. I just don't like admitting it. I went because I didn't own a dress fit for dancing. The store smelled like coffee beans and leather and that sharp sweetness of hard candy in glass jars. I moved past the flour barrels, past the rope coils, straight to the fabric table where Mrs. Harlan kept her good cloth. And there, folded between a brown wool and a cream muslin, was a bolt of blue calico, the color of a winter sky, just before the stars come out. I touched it, ran my fingers along the edge. Something catch your eye. Miss Whitlow, Mrs. Harlan, watching me with that particular look, half curiosity, half calculation, that shopkeepers get when they sense a story. "Just lookin'," I said. But I wasn't just lookin', and she knew it, and I knew she knew it. And then right there, between the calico and the muslin, I heard it, a whisper. Two women near the pickle barrel. Voices pitched low, but not low enough. "Did you hear Wyatt Cole ask the limping teacher to the dance?" Can you imagine the limping teacher, not Miss Whitlow, not Anna, the limping teacher? I felt the old armor slide into place, that cool, heavy thing I'd been wearing since I was 9 years old. The reflex to agree, to shrink, to set down the calico and walk out with my uneven step and my measured dignity and my acceptance of things as they were. I almost did. But something flared in me, something I can't quite name even now. Not hope, something older and fiercer. The same thing that makes a woman stand up after she's been knocked flat. Defiance, maybe, or just the plain refusal to let two women at a pickle barrel have the last word on my life. "I'll take 3 yards of the blue," I said. I sewed that night by lamplight, cut the pattern from memory. I'd made dresses before, practical ones, dark colors, nothing that drew attention. This one was different. This one had a fitted waist and a collar that showed my collarbones, and well, it was the dress of a woman who wanted to be seen. Halfway through the stitching, I got up and lit the hearth in my room, my own hearth. For the first time in, honestly, I couldn't remember how long. The warmth startled me, like running into someone you used to know. The fabric was the color of a clear winter sky. I stitched until my fingers ached. The hearth crackled behind me like it was surprised to be asked. Friday morning, the children were restless as cats in a thunderstorm. Valentine's Day was tomorrow, and every child in that schoolhouse had opinions about it. The boys pretended to hate it, rolling their eyes, making gagging sounds when I mentioned the holiday. But I caught young Daniel Tucker carving a heart into his desk with his thumbnail when he thought I wasn't looking. The girls were worse. They wanted to make Valentines. Paper hearts cut from whatever scrap I could find. Brown butcher paper, mostly. And some faded red fabric I'd been meaning to use for bookmarks. They cut and pasted and argued over who got the best scissors. And the schoolhouse filled up with that particular energy children make when they're building something with their hands. Tommy Briggs, 8 years old, sharp as a tack, stutter that made other boys snicker, crumpled his paper heart and shoved it off his desk. "Can't even cut straight," he muttered. "I'm stupid." I was beside him before the paper hit the floor, knelt down, bad leg folded awkward, the way it always did, and smoothed that crumpled heart flat against his desk with both hands. "Tommy Briggs, you look at me," he did, eyes wet, jaw tight. "You are not stupid. You are a boy whose hands are still learning what his mind already knows. And this heart is beautiful." He didn't believe me, not fully, but he picked up the scissors again. I stood up slow, grip on the desk edge, and turned to find little Sarah Meeks watching me with those clear, unblinking eyes. "Miss Whitlow," she said, "are you going to the dance?" The room got quiet. The way rooms do when a child asks the question every adult's been thinking. Well, I smoothed my skirt. "We'll see. Sarah, you should go," she said. "Matter of fact as weather. You'd be the prettiest one there." And the other children, God love them, nodded, like it was obvious. Like there wasn't a single reason in the world why their teacher shouldn't walk into a dance hall and be beautiful. My hand found the edge of the desk again. Not for balance this time. for something else, something that pressed against my chest so hard I couldn't finish the sentence I'd started about penmanship. Because I just knelt on this floor and told Tommy Briggs he wasn't stupid. Told it with my whole heart. Meant every syllable. And I'd spent 6 years in this schoolhouse doing the same, telling Mary Dawson her secondhand dress was just as fine as anybody's. Telling every child who walked through that door with doubt on their face that they mattered. That being different wasn't being less. I'd meant all of it. Every word. At noon, I stepped outside to ring the lunch bell and saw Wyatt Cole riding slow along the road. He didn't stop, just touched the brim of his hat as he passed, and I saw it again. That crack. Something in the way he held himself too still. The way his eyes stayed on me 1 beat longer than comfortable before he looked away. Like looking cost him something. The children rushed past me. And Sarah grabbed my hand tight, sticky, certain, and said, "See, Miss Whitlow, even the cowboys want you to go." That evening, I looked at the blue dress folded in my trunk, and I looked at the paper hearts drying on the windowsill, every single one of them crooked and imperfect and absolutely, entirely perfect. Saturday morning, the dress was finished. I put it on slow, aware of everything, the cool fabric sliding over my shoulders, the way the waist cinched just right, the hem brushing the tops of my boots. I buttoned each button like I was counting something. Then I turned to the mirror. It was a small mirror, barely bigger than a bread plate, hung on a nail by the door. I hadn't really looked at myself in it I used it for my hair. Sure. Practical things. But I hadn't looked not the way you look when you're asking the mirror a question. And for one moment, one unguarded, breathless moment, I saw a woman. Not a teacher, not a limp, not the charity case of Prescott, Arizona territory, just a woman in a blue dress with brown hair pinned up and eyes that still had light in them. The moment lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then the old voice came back, the one that lives in the space between what the world told me and what I started believing. Who do you think you are, Anna? A blue dress doesn't change what you are, doesn't change how you walk, doesn't change what they'll see. When you step into that hall, I heard Mrs. Calloway's whisper. I heard my mother's quiet weeping the night the fever broke and my leg didn't come back right. I heard the doctor she'll manage like a sentence handed down by a judge. The fever crippled my leg when I was 9 years old, but I crippled the rest of myself. One small surrender at a time, every dance I didn't attend, every fabric I didn't touch, every fire I didn't light in my own hearth, because a woman who doesn't expect warmth stops deserving it. The limp wasn't what held me back. It was the story I'd built around it brick by brick, year by year, that I was less, that love was for whole women, that wanting things was dangerous for someone like me. I sat on the edge of my bed in my blue dress and I cried, not quietly. The kind that comes from 20 years of holding something too heavy. When it passed, and it did pass, the way storms do, I felt lighter, not healed. That's too clean a word, but emptied, like I'd set down a trunk I'd been carrying so long. I forgot my arms were full. I washed my face, pressed cold water against my eyes until the swelling eased, looked in the mirror again. The woman was still there. I touched the glass with my fingertips. "You're going to that dance," I whispered, and I didn't know if I was brave or foolish, but I knew those two things had always been cousins. Saturday afternoon. The whole town hummed like a hive somebody'd kicked. I needed hairpins. That was my excuse. Anyway, the reason I gave myself for walking down Main Street in broad daylight. when I could have stayed behind my schoolhouse walls where nobody could see me and nobody could whisper. But I was tired of walls, tired of hiding, and if I was going to walk into that dance tonight, I figured I'd better practice walking through town first. Prescott Social Hall sat at the end of the main road, and through its open doors, I could see the women decorating pine boughs tied with red ribbon, lanterns being hung from the rafters, a long table draped in white cloth for the punch. It looked warm. It looked like a place where people belonged. I was staring too long. That's how Mrs. Calloway caught me. "Anna, dear." She appeared beside me the way weather appears suddenly, with a shift in pressure you feel before you see. Elizabeth Calloway. Tall, handsome, the kind of woman who arranged flowers at church and arranged lives with equal precision. Her daughter Emily stood behind her blonde, perfect-postured Emily, who'd been telling everyone since Christmas that Wyatt Cole would choose her. "I heard about Mr. Cole's invitation," Mrs. Calloway said. She smiled the way people smile when they're handing you something sharp wrapped in velvet. "How unexpected." "It was," I said carefully. "I do worry for you, though." She adjusted her glove, smoothing each finger like she was straightening her thoughts. "Expectations can be so unkind to a woman in your situation. A man like Mr. Cole, well, people will wonder about his reason, and I'd hate for you to be hurt by what they decide those reasons are." She let the silence do the rest. Didn't need to say the word charity. She'd built a house around it and walked me right to the door. I felt the old surrender pull at me, that reflex, deep as bone, to nod and agree and say, "Of course, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking," to hand back the hope like it was stolen property. But I thought of Wyatt's face in the doorframe. No pity there. No performance. I thought of Tommy Briggs picking up those scissors. I thought of the woman in the mirror who was still there after the crying stopped. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Calloway," I said, and I looked her straight in the eye. "I truly do." Then I walked past her, bought my hairpins, walked home with my uneven step, left foot solid, right foot dragging, and every step felt like a word I was writing in the dust. "I am going," and I meant it. Lord help me. Standing there in the late afternoon sun with my hairpins in my pocket. I meant it with everything I had. 6 o'clock. I was dressed. Blue calico pressed smooth, hair pinned up with the new pins, my mother's cameo brooch at my collar, the only fine thing I owned. Passed to me the year she died. I'd polished it with a soft cloth until the ivory profile caught the lamplight. I stood at the door of my quarters. My hand was on the latch, and I couldn't turn it. Everything I'd built, the defiance on the boardwalk, the certainty, the fire in my belly, when I looked Mrs. Calloway in the eye, it all collapsed at that door like a house of cards in a crosswind. Because being brave in daylight is one thing, walking out into the dark is another. I saw it all clear as a vision. The doors of the social hall opening, every face turning, the fiddle stuttering to silence. My limp God, my limp amplified under lantern light. Every uneven step, a declaration of everything wrong with me. I imagined Wyatt's face changing, just a flicker, just the smallest shift from pride to regret when he realized what he'd done, what he'd hitched himself to for the night. I imagined pity. That was the worst part. Not cruelty. I could survive cruelty. I'd been surviving it for years. But pity from a man like Wyatt Cole would break something in me that I'd never get back. My fingers went to the top button of my dress. I was going to take it off, fold it up, put it back in the trunk with the rest of the things I decided not to want. Then the schoolhouse clock struck 6. That clock, the same clock that marked my day's first bell, lunch bell, last bell, the same clock that ticked behind me while I knelt beside Tommy Briggs and told him he wasn't stupid. The same clock that counted the hours I spent teaching 32 children that they were brave enough, smart enough, worthy enough to stand up and try. If I don't walk through this door, I thought, what have I been teaching them words? Just pretty words from a woman who didn't believe them herself. I turned the latch. The door opened to cold February dark, and Wyatt Cole standing beside his wagon, hat in his hands again, same way he'd held it in the schoolhouse careful, like something fragile. His boots were polished, dark coat, clean shirt. He'd taken trouble, real trouble. He looked at me, and I will never forget this. Not if I live to be 100. He said one word. Beautiful, not the dress, not the hair. He was looking at my face when he said it. I reached for his hand. He didn't offer it first. He waited until I reached. Then his fingers closed around mine warm, steady, sure, and he helped me into the wagon without a word about the step being high or my leg being stiff. The wagon creaked down the dark road toward the social hall. Stars burned above us, sharp and cold as pins pressed into black velvet. I didn't speak, neither did he, but his silence didn't ask anything of me, and that honestly was the kindest sound I'd ever heard. The doors opened, and the light hit me like a wave. Lanterns, dozens of them, hung from every rafter, cast in the hall in gold. Pine boughs and red ribbon draped the walls. The fiddle player and the guitar man sat on a raised platform at the far end, playing something bright and fast that filled the room like laughter. And the room was full every rancher, every wife, every daughter in her best dress, every cowboy with his hair slicked and his boots shining. They all turned. I felt it the way you feel a change in wind every eye, every head, swiveling toward the door where I stood on Wyatt Cole's arm. The fiddle stopped, mid-note, the bow just lifted off the strings and hung there, suspended, like the fiddler forgot what his hand was for. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your skin and makes you aware of every imperfect thing about yourself. I felt my limp like a shout, my left foot on the polished wood floor, solid, then my right foot following a half-beat late, dragging just enough to make the silence louder. I saw Mrs. Calloway's face. I saw Emily's pretty Emily, in a pink dress with lace at the collar, her mouth slightly open. I saw the ranchers and their wives and their careful, measuring eyes. I could have shrunk, could have pressed myself against the wall, the way I'd pressed myself against walls my whole life, quiet, small, apologetic for taking up space. I felt the floor under my left foot, solid pine, strong. I felt it under my right, the same floor, holding me just the same, not caring one bit that I landed on it different. I tightened my hand on Wyatt's arm. I lifted my chin, and I chose step by deliberate step. Each one, a word in a sentence, I'd been writing my whole life without knowing it to walk to the center of that dance floor. Not the edge, not a quiet corner, the center. My left foot landed, my right foot followed, and the sound it made on that wooden floor, that uneven, dragging, imperfect rhythm, was the sound of me arriving somewhere I should have been all along. Wyatt followed my lead, not the other way around. I chose the center, and he came with me. The fiddle player, God bless that man, started again. A waltz, slow, sweet, simple, Wyatt took my hand in his left and placed his right at my waist, and we began to move. He matched my rhythm. Not the music's mine. He'd figured out the timing of my uneven step and built his waltz around it. Not accommodation, not charity, just respect. The kind that doesn't announce itself. We danced. I won't pretend I was graceful. I won't pretend my limp disappeared or that I floated across that floor like the girls in stories. My left hip dropped with every turn. My right foot dragged on the downbeat, but Wyatt held me steady, and his eyes never left my face, and the music wrapped around us like a warm wind off the desert. By the second song, 3 couples joined. I saw Daniel Tucker's parents and old Mr. Hoffman with his wife who'd been married 40 years. They stepped onto the floor like they were answering something that didn't need to be said out loud. By the third song, the whole hall was moving, and somewhere in the middle of that third song, I stopped counting my steps, stopped hearing whispers, stopped feeling my limp as a verdict or a sentence or a story somebody else wrote about me. It was just how I walked, and I was dancing. The music filled the hall, and the hall filled with movement, and I was part of it, uneven and imperfect and absolutely, finally, enough. He drove me home under stars so bright, they looked like they'd been polished. The wagon creaked along the dark road, and the cold pressed in. But I didn't feel it, not really. I felt warm from the inside, the way you feel after doing something that scared you half to death and surviving it. We talked, really talked for the first time. Not about cattle or curriculum or the weather or any of the safe, careful subjects people use to keep each other at arm's length. "I've been watching you," he said, quiet, like a confession. "Through the schoolhouse window, months now. The way you are with those children, the way you—" He stopped, turned his hat in his hands, even though he was supposed to be holding the reins. "I ain't good with words, Miss Whitlow." "You're doing fine," I said. "Took me months to work up the nerve to come inside that schoolhouse." I looked at him, this man the whole territory thought was made of iron and cattle money, and I saw the crack again. The one I'd noticed in the door frame, he was afraid too. Different fear than mine, but fear all the same. The fear of a man who'd rather face a drought than risk being told no by a woman in a chalk-dusted dress. "Well," I said, "I almost didn't open my door tonight, so I suppose we're even." He pulled the wagon up to the schoolhouse step, came around, and helped me down again, waiting for me to reach first. We stood there in the cold, breath-making small clouds between us, and the stars scattered overhead like someone had spilled a jar of sugar across black cloth. No grand declaration, no kiss. This was 1887, and we were both people who moved carefully, who understood that the best things aren't rushed. "Same time next Sunday," he said. "Church, then dinner. If you're willin'." "I'm willin'," I said, and it came out easy. No hesitation, no flinch. The first time in years I'd answered a question about my future without bracing for the answer to hurt. He tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Whitlow." I opened my mouth to correct him and stopped. Felt the flutter of it, the cost. Then I said it anyway. "Anna, if you're taking me to dinner, you'd best call me Anna." That smile again, quiet and real, and worth every terrified minute of this night. "Good night, Anna." I watched him drive away, the wagon lantern growing smaller against the dark until it was just a point of light, then gone. The night settled around me, cold and vast and full of stars. Inside, my quarters were warm, the hearth the one I'd lit yesterday morning, the one I'd kept fed all day like a promise I was making to myself, was still burning. Low embers, orange and steady, holding their heat the way only well-tended fires do. I added a log, sat down in the chair beside it, still wearing my blue dress, and let the warmth find me. I thought about Mrs. Calloway and her careful cruelty. I thought about the pickle barrel whispers and the doctor who told my mother she'll manage, and the 20 years I spent proving him right, managing, always managing, never once asking myself if I deserved more than managed. And I thought about Wyatt's eyes in a door frame. I won't deny that mattered. It did. But the choice to buy the calico, to light the hearth, to turn the latch, to walk to the center of that hall, on uneven legs, under the gaze of every soul who ever whispered about me, that was mine. Nobody gave me that. I took it. I caught my reflection in the dark window glass, just a shadow, really, a woman in blue sitting by a fire, and I nodded at her. She nodded back. The fire crackled, and the February wind pressed against the windows, and I sat in the warmth of a hearth I'd finally lit for myself. Turns out, a woman's worth ain't got nothing to do with how she walks. It's everything to do with how she lights up a room just by standing in it. Anna Whitlow, Prescott, Arizona Territory, February 1887.